They thought he was just a weak old man. They laughed at his clothes, mocked his steps, and shoved him like he didn't matter. But what these thugs didn't know was that this man had once stood on real battlefields, where bullets rained down and only the strongest survived. And in the next few minutes, they were about to learn a lesson they would never forget, because this old man wasn't ordinary at all. He was a Vietnam veteran. "Move it, old man!" one of the thugs barked, shoving past an elderly man who was simply walking down the sidewalk. The man they pushed was Mr. James Carter, gray hair, weathered face, and a quiet dignity in his step. His back might have been slightly bent with age, but his stride carried a calm strength. To anyone passing by, he looked like just another aging neighbor trying to get home. But to those who truly knew him, James was much more, a man with stories carved into every wrinkle, a man who had lived through storms most people could never imagine. Unfortunately, the group of young troublemakers on the corner didn't see that. They didn't care. They were too busy showing off to each other, feeding their pride with cruelty. They burst into laughter as James steadied himself. One boy elbowed his friend, pointing. "Look at this grandpa! Bet he can't even cross the street without help." The leader of the group, a tall, cocky thug named Darnell, stepped forward. He circled James slowly, like a predator playing with its prey. "What you doing in our neighborhood, old man? Shouldn't you be in some nursing home watching TV with the rest of your friends?" James didn't answer. He stood tall, his face calm, his breathing steady. He'd been in situations far worse than this, though the young men had no idea. To them, his silence looked like weakness. The bystanders walking along the street slowed down. Some whispered nervously, others pretended not to see, but not one of them stepped in. They all recognized the type, boys who thought they were men, picking fights to prove themselves. Darnell smirked, eager for a reaction. "Yo, check his boots!" he shouted, stomping at James's foot. The old worn leather barely budged. "Look at these dusty things. Probably older than me." The group howled with laughter, slapping each other's shoulders, proud of their insult. Still, James said nothing. He stood there, eyes fixed, posture unshaken. He didn't raise his voice, didn't swing a fist, didn't even blink. It was a silence that carried weight, though the thugs were too blind to see it. What they didn't realize was this. James Carter's silence wasn't fear, it was discipline. It was the kind of control forged not on quiet city streets, but in the chaos of battlefields half a world away. And before the night was over, these young men would learn just how dangerous it was to mistake silence for weakness. Finally, James spoke. His voice was deep, calm, and commanding, like a thunderclap in the middle of their laughter. "You boys should choose your words carefully," he said, locking eyes with Darnell. The laughter cut short. Something in the way he spoke didn't belong to the fragile image they had created of him. It wasn't the shaky voice of an old man. It was the voice of someone who had faced storms, fire, and death and walked away. But Darnell wasn't about to lose face. He sneered and shoved James in the chest. "What you gonna do about it, huh? You can barely stand straight?" James staggered a half step back but quickly steadied himself. He didn't retaliate, didn't raise his fists. Instead, he let out a low, steady chuckle, a laugh that carried more weight than any threat. "Son," he said slowly, his eyes never leaving Darnell's, "I've stood straighter in jungles filled with bullets than I ever will here on this street." The words hit harder than any punch. The thugs exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence beginning to crack. "What's he talking about?" one whispered under his breath. Without rushing, James unbuttoned his coat. From the inside pocket, he pulled out a folded cap, its fabric old but well kept. Embroidered on the front was the insignia that told a story. All on its own, the mark of a Vietnam veteran. The air shifted instantly. The smirks on the young men's faces melted away. "Vietnam?" One of the younger thugs stammered, his voice unsteady. His bravado was already gone. James nodded, his tone sharp and unshakable. "While you kids were busy acting tough on corners, I was thousands of miles away, crawling through mud, carrying brothers on my back, and watching friends breathe their last breaths. You think this scares me? A few loudmouths? You don't even know the meaning of fear." The street went silent. Even the bystanders who had been pretending not to stare stopped in their tracks, their eyes fixed on James. The old man wasn't just old anymore. was a warrior, a survivor, someone who had seen things they couldn't even imagine. James stepped forward slowly, closing the space between him and Darnell. His gaze was steady, cutting through the young man's tough exterior. I've seen real men, men younger than you, stand tall in the face of death, James said firmly. And here you are, wasting your breath trying to bully someone who's lived long enough to know better. That's not strength, boy. That's weakness. Darnell's bravado cracked. His jaw clenched, but his fists dropped to his sides. For the first time that night, he realized he wasn't looking at a helpless old man. He was staring at a soldier who had already faced the worst the world could throw at him and survived. One of the younger thugs lowered his head, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know, he muttered, ashamed. James studied their faces carefully. He wasn't looking for pity. He didn't want excuses. He wanted them to understand. His voice was steady, carrying the weight of decades of wisdom. Of course you didn't know. Men like me don't walk around bragging. We don't need to. But remember this, respect costs you nothing. And one day, when you've lived long enough, when your hair is gray and your back aches, you'll pray the next generation shows it to you too. The crowd that had gathered began to murmur in agreement. A few nodded their heads, others clapped softly. Then, from across the street, a woman cupped her hands and shouted, "Tell him, Mr. Carter!" Her voice was followed by cheers and whistles of support. Darnell, the self-proclaimed leader, shifted uncomfortably. His pride was crumbling in front of everyone. He forced a half-smile, trying to save face. "Look, we were just messing around." "Didn't mean no harm?" James's eyes narrowed. His gaze cut straight through the flimsy excuse. "Messing around?" he repeated, his tone sharp. "Son, you have no idea the harm you cause when you treat people like they don't matter. That attitude? That's how friendships die, families break apart, even wars begin. Words and actions, they carry power. And once they're out, you can't take them back." The weight of those words hung in the air. One by one, the thugs' postures deflated. Shoulders slouched, heads bowed, their tough act dissolved. The youngest among them, no more than 16, took a shaky step forward. His voice trembled. "Mr., were you really there? In the war?" James's hard expression softened slightly. He nodded. "Yes, I was there. I fought so kids like you could stand here today, free to live your lives, free even to make mistakes. But don't waste that freedom. Use it to do better, to be better." The boy's eyes watered. "I'm sorry," he whispered. James placed a firm hand on his shoulder. "Then prove it. Not to me, but to the next person you meet. Remember, respect makes you a man, not fear." The group stood frozen, ashamed but changed. Slowly, they drifted away, leaving James standing tall in the middle of the sidewalk. Applause erupted. Strangers clapped, some even cheered. To them, he wasn't just an old man anymore. He was a hero, still serving his community without lifting a fist. James tucked his cap back into his coat and smiled faintly. "Still serving," he murmured, "just in a different way now." With his head held high, he walked on, dignity intact. A living reminder that true strength isn't found in bullying others, but in protecting them. And that day, those young men walked away with a lesson they'd never forget. True, strength isn't about bullying, it's about respect. If you were moved by this story, make sure to give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss more powerful stories like this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.